How to cook, All right. All right, Malcolm, I think we're ready. Are you?
We are ready, and you are ready.
Are you going to mute your end? Okay. Good. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this exciting event. I'm telling you, I'm so excited about this. I've been looking forward to it for a long, long time because this was a person that when I met her at the Modern Elder Academy a couple of months ago at a workshop, I was so impressed with her and what she said. And she had such a profound effect on me that I said, I would just love to be able to introduce her to my friends. And so I took a risk at a break thinking that she would probably say no. I asked her if she would appear on the executive book review, and surprise, surprise, she said yes. But that's the kind of person she is. So I want to introduce her briefly to you. It's Lynne Twist. Lynne has been a philanthropist and a global visionary for over 40 years. I read where she's raised over $150 million for philanthropic purposes. Her life and her work is committed to alleviating poverty, ending world hunger, supporting social justice, and environmental sustainability. She's worked with Mother Teresa in Calcutta. She's interviewed the Dalai Lama. She was present at Nelson Mandela's inauguration. She's been interviewed by Oprah, and now I get to interview her. That's pretty cool, I think. We get to be here, so I'm really excited about that. But I want to tell you one quick story. I met her at the Modern Elder Academy in Baja. I'd never met her before. And so the first morning, we're sitting out on the veranda overlooking the ocean, which is right behind me. This is a photograph I took. And I'm just having my breakfast, and I feel this presence behind me. And all of a sudden, I feel these arms wrap around my neck, and I'm embraced with this big hug. And I look up, and it was Lynne. Now, I'm an Enneagram 4, and if you know anything about an Enneagram 4, an Enneagram 4's need is to be special. and I had that big hug, and I looked up, I said, wow, I must really be special. And then I noticed that she was doing that to everybody, and that was her regular morning greeting. But I still felt special because that's the way Lynne greeted me and everybody in our workshop every morning, because she's a person that's so filled with love and the desire to help other people and make life better. So we're going to have an opportunity to hear her this afternoon. I want to mention briefly before I move on that we're sponsored by the San Antonio Health Plan this afternoon and Robin's Nest. We're grateful to them for helping make this possible. So, Lynne, it is a true honor to have you here with us. It really is. And I want to start off with that word honor. I read in your book, like one of the first pages, you said, I've had the honor of meeting and knowing some of the richest people in the world. And I've also had the honor of meeting and knowing some of the poorest people in the world. And when I read that, I really stopped and I thought about that. Now we're used to hearing the word honor and feeling honored to be in the presence of important people, rich people, influential people. But we're not that used to hearing the word honor being used to be in the presence of what we call poor people. So let me start off with that question. Talk to us a little bit about what you've learned from, quote, poor people.
Well, first of all, thank you, Pat, and all of you for being part of this wonderful gathering of souls here. I really appreciated being invited and included in your wonderful executive book review group. Well, I've learned of the course of my life that there aren't any people who are poor, and I thought there were. In fact, when I really got to know people that I used to call poor, I realized there was nothing poor about them. That they are strong and creative and intelligent, often living in conditions of abject poverty, but they're not poor. What's poor is their circumstances, not them. In fact, often those circumstances produce a kind of inner strength, a determination, a commitment to build relationships. When resources are not available, financial or otherwise, people often become the kind of people we all wish we were, They exhibit more courage to live through a day than we're going to need in our lifetime. I've met mothers in Ethiopia after the 1984-1985 famine who had nothing and lost many children to starvation. And although my heart broke for them, they were strong, resilient, incredibly courageous women who had never learned to read or write, but they were keenly intelligent. They knew when to know that their cattle didn't have water by the color of the fur on their back. They understood how to navigate a corrupt government to have their needs met when they were desperate. They relied on each other in a kind of strength of sisterhood, of motherhood, that I've rarely seen anywhere else on earth, particularly where people are affluent and they don't have to depend on each other. So I've learned tremendous lessons from people that I used to call poor, that I would never refer to that label of them any longer, because who they are whole and complete people like you and I, who have hopes and dreams and wishes for themselves and their families. What's poor is their circumstances. And when we label people by their circumstances, we demean them and we demean ourselves in some way, thinking that we are our circumstances rather than we're whole and complete people living in the ebb and flow and often gift and sometimes tyranny of our circumstances. And that's what's poor, that's what's rich. And even with people that I used to call rich, when we label people rich, we don't see them any longer. We see their circumstances, their financial resources. We start to think of them in ways that are inconsistent with their own humanity, and they start thinking of themselves that way too. So these labels of rich and poor don't really describe a human being. They describe the circumstances in which those people are living. And that's a very different thing than them, because all of us are people who, we have hopes and dreams. We are whole and complete people. And when we get trapped in thinking that we are our circumstances, that's when we get confused about the depth of meaning and power of our own lives. So I can't tell you how important it is for me to remove those labels in the work that I do, so that who I see is that whole and complete Mary Lou Keller on my screen, or Kurt McGurley, if I'm saying his name properly, or Victoria or Virginia, rather than the circumstances or the labels that we put on each other, which have us then suddenly have a lens where we can't see them clearly any longer. And rich and poor do that. Actually, political parties do that, where we say conservative or liberal. We start to see not the person that's there in their glory, but we already start making decisions and opinions about them before we even engage with their humanity. So in the work that I've done to end world hunger, the work that I do to empower and facilitate people who come into or earn tremendous amounts of wealth, and all of us in between. We're just folks doing the best we can with what we've been given. And that's been very humbling for me to reduce or remove, sorry, those labels and just interact with people and know that we all have the capacity to love. We all have the capacity to be loved. And that's kind of all we want from life, really, when it comes right down to it.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you referring to me as a whole person, but I sometimes think that the more I learn and the more I grow and the more I engage with people like you, sometimes I feel not in a negative way, but less whole in the sense that I've got some things that I need to complete, because I look back and see the attitudes that I've had toward other people and toward myself. I lived most of my life in the service of money. My net worth and my self-worth were combined. I didn't feel that I could be a worthy husband, a worthy father, worthy anything unless I had money. It was all tied to my bank account. And you helped me see the futility of that, of running on what you call the hedonic treadmill my entire life. And the insidious thing about it is I never got all that money. It always eluded me. So tell us a little bit about what you've learned about that hedonic treadmill and how money really shapes who we are from the early part of our life.
Well, I don't know that money shapes us, but our perceptions, our attitudes, our cultural kind of unfortunate, the dysfunctional culture of a commercial, commodified money system has been confusing, I think, for all of us. I mean, really, when I talked about the spectrum of people living in really resource poor conditions, whole and complete beautiful people living in resource poor conditions, and whole and complete beautiful people living in excess resources, and all of us in between, we all are plagued, and I think, and anxious and upset and sometimes suffering in our relationship with money. And more than most people, actually, I'm going to say, have a relationship with money that's troubling for them. Like you just shared, Pat, I'm sure people from all of the people that know you think you're doing just fine, that you're abundantly clear about who you are, that you have everything you need, that you're a generous soul, that you're tremendously successful. And then here inside of your life, you're questioning that. And we all go there. We all have a kind of anxious, most people anyway, upset kind of relationship with money where we think we're wrong in some way, or we're not enough, or we didn't do it right, or we didn't invest in Google when we should have. We probably all should have done that, or we made a bad investment and then we think that there's something wrong with us. Or a harsh father told us we would never amount to anything, and we kind of believed that. And then even if we have $1 billion, it's not enough. So people have almost to the person in the work that I've done, a distorted, dysfunctional relationship with money. They've made it something that they kind of are a slave to. And not them personally so much, although it seems very personal, but I think it's cultural. I think that we swim in a culture that exalts money to be so important that we've made it more important than human life. People will do things that are completely inconsistent with their humanity, completely inconsistent with their values for money. And everybody looks the other way, including them. Or people will do things that are just so bizarre, like not talk to a sister or a brother for 10 years over a money issue, when in fact they love that person, they grew up with that person. And that says money's more important than that relationship. And in many ways, we all know in our heart of hearts, that's never true. We've made money more important than the natural world. We'll destroy a rainforest for money. We'll pollute a river for money and look the other way. And people will pretend like it's not happening. And now here we are in this huge climate crisis. So we've done things in the name of money, in service to money, enslaved by the money system, that are not things we're ultimately very proud of. And we've termed success as the only way you can really define it is, does that person have a lot of money? So sometimes we'll meet people we haven't seen in years and we'll say, how's your son or daughter doing? And if they say, oh, they're very, very successful, we think that means they made a lot of money. When it might mean they're very, very, very happy. They live in a modest way. My son is a teacher, or my daughter is a nurse, or whatever they value, and are serving people in a beautiful way. And that is a form of true, honest to God success. But somehow, if it's not attached to a big paycheck, we don't consider ourselves successful. And this kind of mindset I'm talking about is not as personal as we think it is. It's in the system in which we live. It's in the culture, the commercial, commodified culture of money. And then we personalize this dysfunction rather than it's our dysfunction. So this anxiety, this upset, this constant feeling wrong or not right or not quite on top of it with money doesn't have as much to do with the amount as we think it does. We think that when people get a lot of money, they don't have these fears any longer. But I can tell you personally, that's just not the case. I work with some of our billionaire families, and they are frantic in their relationship with money, completely anxious all the time. If the stock market goes down 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 points, they can't sleep, even though they have billions. And so even with more money than you could possibly spend in a lifetime, people still have anxiety, suffering, upsets in their relationship with money. So yes, it's wonderful to have more money. I'm not denying that. I would like some more myself, but it doesn't resolve everything. It's not the answer to everything. It's not what it's cracked up to be. And so we're all kind of caught in a mythology around money that I call the myth of scarcity. This belief that there's somehow not going to be enough to go around, and somewhere, somehow, somebody's going to get left out because there's not enough to go around. There's not enough. And that mindset of scarcity has us think we have to accumulate way more than we need to take care of the people that we think are our people, whoever that is. And then other people might be left out, but we can't help them quite yet. We can only help them when we have way more than we need, because there's not enough to go around and someone's going to be left out. And I'm calling that mindset the mindset of scarcity. That's something that haunts us so much, that has us behave inconsistent with our humanity. And I say that that mindset lives in the culture, and that it's false, and that it's not true. And it doesn't bring out the best in us. It brings out the worst in us. And so I call that the condition of thinking, the unconscious, unexamined mindset of scarcity, which haunts everybody on earth, no matter how much they have or don't have, and has us scrambling for more when we don't really understand that we're okay just the way we are. So that's kind of a long.
What I realized in reading your book was that my mindset toward money was not an absolute truth of the universe. It wasn't truth at all. It was conditioned into me. If I had been born into that Ashwar tribe in the Amazon that you talk about in your book, I would not have this attitude toward money at all. So it's been conditioned. Now you just said something, I'd like you to expand on it. You said it causes us to act in ways that are not consistent with our humanity. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? What consistent with our humanity?
Well, we do things like not talk to somebody that we were married to for years over a money beef, a money gripe. When in fact, if the money weren't involved, we would get that resolved. It turns people who used to love each other, going through divorce proceedings, into a couple monsters. I mean, we've all seen it, and some of us have been there. It has us do things to the natural world that we know are wrong, that are really in some ways kind of criminal. It's often called ecocide. That's a term that environmentalists use. killing an ecosystem, damaging a particular species for a huge financial gain. That's just inconsistent with who we are as a human being. And it has us replace our generosity with our natural generosity, wanting to help each other, with a kind of greed and fear. Because if there's not enough to go around, then you think, well, you have to hold on to what you have. There's a wonderful metaphor that a teacher of mine uses that I like to share with people because it was meaningful to me. His name is Brother David Stendel-Rost, and he's a beautiful Benedictine monk. And he talks about gratefulness. And he says that the posture of the hand, when it's open, like it is like this, open and flat like that, is the posture of the hand when it's giving. And the posture of the hand when it's receiving is the same posture, open with fingers unfurled. So giving and receiving, have your hand, let's say, and your life in the same posture of giving and receiving. It's when the fingers start to curl and grasp and hold on that we begin the formation of the fist. And that is the source and the beginning of all violence. And when you think about it, where there's violence on the planet, someone is grasping, holding on with greed to something that they think they cannot live without and have to take away from others. And so that's an example of being inconsistent with our humanity, because who we really are is generosity, reciprocity, relatedness, sharing, connectivity, being with each other, just like this group is right now on the screen and in the room where people are live being together. That's what we really want. Relationships with each other that have give and take, give and receive, I'll say, instead of take.
Wow. I saw that yesterday because, as you know, we've had a terrible situation here in Uvalde, just about 80 miles from here with that school shooting. And so it's been very much on everybody's mind. And I was watching TV most of the day yesterday, and some of the newscasters were even crying. They were having a hard time talking about this. And right in the middle of this, they cut to a commercial. They cut to a commercial. And it was as if these people were there physically in a room mourning together, and some salesman walked in trying to sell them something. And you just wondered, when you said consistent with our humanity, why didn't somebody in the TV station say, no, we're not going to run this commercial right now? But anyway, I would love to hear you, and I guess so much I want to ask you, but could you share the story of meeting Mother Teresa in your book? That story was so meaningful to me. And I'll tell you what, it did not end the way I thought it was going to end. The way it ended might have been as embarrassing to me as it was to you when you got that. Anyway, would you mind telling it?
I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, I was raised as a Catholic. And so Mother Teresa had a special place in my heart, and she was very much of an icon for me. I often thought, that she was the ultimate holy being. And I think many other people would think that too, Catholic or not. And there was a certain point in my life where, when my father died very suddenly of a heart attack, that as a child, when a parent dies, you often think it's your fault in some way, especially if you're Catholic, because the Catholic religion has a lot of kind of built in a lot of guilt in there. And so as a young girl whose father died, I thought, well, maybe he died so suddenly, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe that's why my father got taken away. I think I better become a nun. And that was my, vision for myself. And of course, as you can see, I didn't become a nun, but I started really admiring Mother Teresa. When you think about becoming a nun, you think of who's the greatest, holiest nun in the world, and it's her. But then I let go of that idea. It wasn't quite right for me. And later in my life, as a young married woman with children, I started working on ending world hunger with an organization called the Hunger Project. And that took me to India. And when I was in India, I thought, maybe someday I'll meet Mother Teresa. That would just be so incredible. I had such admiration for her. And I shared that with an Indian friend of mine named Indira, and Indira Koitra is her name. And she said, oh, my goodness, I know Mother Teresa, as if she lived right down the street or something. And I thought, oh, you know Mother Teresa. It was like, oh my God, really? You actually know her? And she said, yes, of course I do. I'd be happy to introduce you. And it was the last day of that particular trip to India. So I told Indira, well, the next time I come, I'll contact you right away. And if you could arrange a meeting, I can't even believe it that I would actually be in her presence. And so the next time I did come to India, I called Indira Koitren. I was in Delhi. And she said, you're in luck. Mother Teresa's here. She's in Delhi at her orphanage for little girls under 2 years old, abandoned little girl babies under 2 years old. And I've called her and she'll meet with you tonight at 7:30. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to meet with Mother Teresa. This was in the morning. It was a Tuesday. And I remember I hadn't been to church or confession in a long time, or communion. So I thought, oh my God, I better make up for lost time. So I went to church, I took communion, I did confession, I practically bathed myself in holy water. I was like, I canceled everything. I suddenly had to just like, I'm going to meet Mother Teresa tonight at 7:30. I have to clean up my act. And I remember thinking, do I wear a Indian outfit or a Western outfit? Do I put a little bindi on my head? I mean, I went a little crazy, but eventually it was time to get in the taxi and go to the old Delhi section of town and show up at her orphanage for my meeting. And as I approached the square, if you've been in India, often there's a square, a little courtyard, and it was all cobblestones, and there was a lot of trash in the cobblestones. It was a very poor part of town, a very part of, where there was a lot of poverty. And I'm a trash picker upper. I mean, I just do that. And so I pick up things in my path and usually carry a plastic bag to do so, especially in India. And I got to the two steps that led to the door to the orphanage, a modest building. And over the door was the picture of Mother Teresa in her blue and white sari, if you would recognize that. People who know her would know her beautiful image is very recognizable. And her picture and the blue and white sari was over the door saying Missionaries of Charity. And there were two steps leading up to that door. And on the lower step was a crumpled up piece of newspaper. And I picked it up, and then inside of the newspaper was a tiny, tiny little human being inside of this crumpled up piece of newspaper, the smallest human being I've ever seen in my life. A little girl. She was about the size of my hand, a premature baby, very, very tiny. And at first I thought it was some sort of a puppy or something. Then I realized, no, this is a little being, a little human being, a little female child. And I was shocked and frightened, and she was alive and she was breathing. And so I took the newspaper off and I wrapped her in I had a shawl and carried her in a little bundle, and then knocked on the door, and one of the nuns opened the door, and I said, this little child was on your doorstep, and I handed her the little girl. And I said, I'm here for a meeting with Mother Teresa. And the lady said, well, I'm so sorry. Thank you for this bringing us this tiny child and picking her up off the doorstep. But Mother Teresa's not here. She went to the jail, the local jail, to bail out the local prostitutes because we have so many babies. We need help here. So she said, can you help us while you're waiting for Mother Teresa to come back? And I said, of course. So I entered this room where there were 39 cribs, iron cribs, on a cement floor painted blue, and several light bulbs hanging by a wire very along the way to light this dimly lit, very clean, but sparse room with 39 cribs. Each crib had 2 or 3 babies in them, all girls under 2. And I was kind of overwhelmed at first with all these children. And the nuns obviously needed some help, and there were some lay people there. So they gave me a job. They put on an apron on me, and I went over to a row. There were a row of sinks, and nuns and lay people were bathing each one of these little babies. And some of the babies were blind, some had missing fingers, most of them were deformed in some way, and they had been given up because they were girls, number one, and also because in many cases there was some dysfunction, something wrong with them. They were disabled in some way, and they were all babies, little ones, under 2 years old. And it seems impossible, but I don't remember hearing anyone cry. Now I know that's not possible, but the experience was one of such joy, such care, such overwhelming love and tenderness, that I was in a state of bliss, washing, bathing these beautiful little beings, and then passing them on to the next lady who would dry them. It was so touching that I realized, my goodness, this is my meeting with Mother Teresa, because she always said, to know me is to know my work. So I thought, if she never comes back, I've met Mother Teresa. I've met the beauty, the generosity, the tenderness, the profound love that is who she is. And while I was thinking that, someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, she's here, she's ready to see you. So I put down my little charge and turned that baby over to the next helper, and walked, following one of the nuns down one corridor into another room, into another corridor, and I was placed on a wooden chair next to a wooden table, next to a chair that was across from that chair, kind of against the wall, in a long, skinny, dark hall. So that was, I guess, where I was going to meet her. And I looked both ways down the hall, waiting for this moment, which for me was so thrilling, I can't even tell you. And then I saw her. She was all the way down the long, dark hall, and she was preceded by her beloved black Labrador retriever, an old dog who was a little bit crippled himself, with a kind of a gray beard, who walked very slowly in front of her, and she was behind her beloved dog. And when they got close enough, I walked toward her. I knelt in front of her. I kissed her hands. And when I knelt down, I was about the same height as Mother Teresa. I'm only 5'6", but she was 4'3". So she was tiny, and she had osteoporosis. She was all bent over. And so she was a very, very tiny woman. And her little gnarly hands and her gnarly feet and her sandals. She was just such a glorious, beautiful human being. And she patted me on the head. She said, stand up, stand up, stand up. She embraced me and then took my hand and took me over to the wooden table and the two chairs. And I sat across from her, and I started immediately crying. Tears were streaming down my face. I was so moved that I was in her presence. And we had a beautiful conversation about the work of ending world hunger, about the babies in her care, about her calling from God. I really can't remember kind of what we talked about. I was in such awe that I was sitting with Mother Teresa that I couldn't even believe it. And I cried all the way through the whole thing. And then there was this moment, this quiet, beautiful, blissful moment, when it was interrupted by a loud scuffle down the other end of the hall. Loud voices, kind of angry voices, loud Indian voices, and also an aroma, a very strong aroma, and not a pleasant one, a strong perfume, actually. And then I saw these large, very, very large people, a couple, a man and a woman, a Sikh man, Indian Sikh man, and a very large Sikh man. He had a giant turban on his head and a big topaz in the middle of the turban. And he had a kurta, which is what men wear in India. And he was a very rotund man. He was about as wide as he was tall. He was very big. And then he had a lot of rings. I remember a ring on every finger, including his thumb, which just, boggled my mind. So he was very opulent. And then behind him came this very large woman who was wearing a very opulent brocade sari, and she had hundreds of bangles, which they call them in India, on her wrist. And she had many, many diamonds, and she had a diamond in her nose, and then diamonds all the way on this chain that went to her ear. So she had big diamonds on her face. And she was overbearing, overweight, over loud, over perfumed, over made up, over the top, everything. And so was this man. And they were Indian, and they were obviously a couple, and they came bursting into my precious meeting with Mother Teresa and turned to her and said to her, "Mother, we did not get the picture, the photo. You promised the photo." And although I didn't know what they were talking about, she seemed to know. So Mother Teresa stood up, and then the woman, the very brash, awful, ugly, I think, in her opulence woman, handed me an Instamatic camera. This is a long time ago, one of those Instamatic cameras, and told me to take the picture. And then she pulled Mother Teresa over next to her and her big husband, and they were so gigantic, and Mother Teresa was so tiny. It was just bizarre. And I took a picture of the three of them. And then this woman did what I consider to be unforgivable. Mother Teresa was very small, and she had osteoporosis, so she was always bent over. And this woman put her hand under Mother Teresa's chin and said, "Chin up, Mother Teresa," and pulled her chin up like that and held it like that, and then said, "Take another picture," and sort of yelled at me. And I was just horrified that she did that to Mother Teresa. And I took the next picture. And then the woman grabbed the camera without saying thank you, didn't say anything to Mother Teresa, didn't hug her, didn't kiss her, didn't thank her. And, she and her husband just whisked their way down the hallway, and they were gone. And I was so angry with these people. They were so rude. They were so awful. They were so over the top. They were so opulent. They were so greedy. They were so, and I hated them. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but I did. And I hated the way they treated her. I hated the way they were so entitled. I hated the way they treated me. And I was boiling mad. And Mother Teresa wasn't. She sat down in her chair. I sat down in mine. My blood was boiling. The veins were popping out of my forehead. And she continued our conversation as if nothing had happened. And I could feel my body was all tense, and I tried to relax. And eventually our meeting came to a closure. And Mother Teresa was just wonderful. I got calmed down a little bit. And I said nothing about those people. And we completed our beautiful conversation. I gave her a hug. She walked me to the door. I got in my taxi, and I started my trip back to New Delhi. And in the car, I remember feeling my body starting to relax and realizing how tense I had become in the presence of those people. And I started to realize that in the presence of complete and total bliss and unconditional love for Mother Teresa and from Mother Teresa, I experienced the deepest and most profound love I'd ever known in my life. And then in the middle of that, I experienced the most profound and upsetting hate that I'd ever known in my life, in her presence. And when I got back to my hotel, I realized this was my teaching with Mother Teresa. And I wrote her a letter, letting her know this extraordinary experience of profound love and severe hate in her presence, and that she never for a moment was anything but loving to those people. That she saw Christ in every face, and I could not see Christ in every face the way she did. And so I thanked her for that teaching. And it was, one of those letters where I apologized for who I had become in her presence and what I couldn't let myself see in those people. And then she wrote me back, and here's the punchline here. She wrote me back in her own hand, signed M. Teresa is how she signed her name. And she said, your circle of compassion is wide and deep, Lynne. And it's very, very powerful and very loving. But you must extend your circle of compassion to the wealthy, to the entitled, to the rich, to the rude, to the blindness that often comes with wealth. That the vicious cycle of wealth can be as intractable, have as much suffering and harm as the vicious cycle of poverty. And you must expand your circle of compassion to include the wealthy, the entitled, the rude. And I'll never forget that letter. And I realized, yes, that's true about me. Easy for me to love people less fortunate than myself, but not easy for me to love people like that. And so if I could find those two people, I would bow to them. I would thank them for the teaching they gave me that day that afforded me the opportunity to recalibrate my circle of compassion, is to make sure that no one is left out and that everyone is worthy of our love. And anyone who's behaving like that is desperate for our love, not someone who doesn't deserve it. So that was my teaching from Mother Teresa. Pat, you're on mute.
It's a holy moment. When I read that, I just had to stop and think about all the times that I've felt that kind of hatred, including just yesterday with all of the Facebook comments and all of the politicians who were trying to capitalize on this terrible event. But yet by reading that story, I become more aware of how that's coming up in my life. And I think by everybody listening to you tell that story, the same thing will happen.
Thank you, Pat.
I would like to have an opportunity for a quick breakout, if that's okay.
Sure.
And we talked about setting this up, and I think that you kind of alluded to your toxic myths of scarcity. And as I recall from our time at MEA, your real breakout, had something to do with that, scarcity or sufficiency. So could I just let you set that up? I know that we've got Malcolm. How much time do we have?
We've got about, what, 40 minutes?
We have 40 more minutes.
Well, we end a little early. So we got,
How much time do you have, Lynn? I guess that's the big question.
Yeah, no, I can do 40 more minutes. That's what I was
Okay, well, I thought we were coming in for a landing. I was getting kind of antsy here. So but yeah, that's I just love those three myths of scarcity. They're really enlightening. So I will let you set that up, and you can, when you're ready, you can lead us into a breakout and give people a chance to collaborate.
Well, Pat, if it's okay, can we do two breakouts? We'll do this one on scarcity, and then we'll do the next one on sufficiency. Can we do that? Will that work?
Absolutely, of course.
Okay, well, let me just say a few things about scarcity to everybody before we have a breakout. I believe that there's a mindset, an unconscious, unexamined mindset that we all swim in called the toxic and unconscious unconditioned of scarcity thinking. And I know that there's places and people who need jobs and who need water and who need work and who need food. And I worked on hunger and poverty, so I know that. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about those of us who have our needs really very well met, probably all of the time, but we don't acknowledge it. We often live in a mindset of scarcity. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough sex. I don't have enough weekends. I don't have enough, square feet in my house. I don't have enough this. I don't have enough that. We live in a kind of constant siren song of, I don't have enough. There's not enough. It's not enough. I don't have enough. There's not enough. It's not enough. That starts to kind of get into our psyche, and we start thinking, I am not enough. I am not enough. And it's an unconscious, unexamined mindset, which I call the first toxic myth of the mindset of scarcity. There's not enough. That's toxic myth number one. Toxic myth number two is more is better. more of anything and everything, more money, more time, more this, more that, more square feet in my house, more companies, more market share, more shoes, more black pants, more this, more that. And the advertising and marketing professions, and some of us are in those professions, do a really good job of having us think we need more of everything all the time. And so more is better is the next toxic myth. And I live in San Francisco where we have tremendous homeless problem, but we're not building houses for them. We're building houses for our stuff that we can't fit in our houses anymore, which is called storage. We have these huge storage units outside the city, little villages of storage units for our stuff. And we're not building houses for people who don't have any place to live. We're building houses for our stuff because we have so much stuff we can't fit them in our houses. And we're not clearing it out because there's a sale this weekend and we have to go to the sale to get more stuff. You know, we're just in this more is better, more is better mythology. I call that the second toxic myth, more is better. And then the third toxic myth is that's just the way that it is. There's nothing you can do about it. That's just the way that it is. And that's the worst one of the three because it holds the mindset in place as if there's nothing you can do about it. So myth number one, toxic myth number one, there's not enough. Toxic myth number two, more is better. More of anything and everything, indiscriminately more. And toxic myth number three is that's just the way that it is. There's nothing I can do about it, which is the source of resignation, the source of discouragement, the source of despair, the source of much of the depression that we see today. So I'll put those in the chat, and that's the thing that I'd like you to discuss. If I can invite you to consider the possibility that you might be caught in the three toxic myths. The three toxic myths, I'm putting it in the chat. The first being there's not enough. More is better. And that's just the way it is. Look and see if in your world, in your life, in the way you think, in the way you perceive yourself and the world, you're caught in any way in the three toxic myths. There's not enough, more is better, that's just the way that it is. And I'm going to assert that you are, because we all are. And I'm calling it an unconscious, unexamined mindset, almost like glasses we have on. We've had them on so long we don't know they're on anymore. And so we see through the mindset of scarcity. It's not like we consider and decide there's not enough. No, it's where we come from into life. We wake up in the morning, most of us, and think, oh, I didn't get enough sleep. And then the next thing is, oh, I don't have enough to wear. And then the next thing is, I don't have enough time. And then the next thing is, da, 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 all the way till the end of the day when we think, oh, I didn't get enough done. So we're in a there's not enough, it's not enough, there's not enough, it's not enough, more is better. And that's just the way that it is, kind of culture that is so embedded that we don't even know that it's a lens through which we look. So my question is, where are you hooked or caught in the mindset of scarcity? It may be with money, it may be with time, it may be with other things. But if you could admit it to your partner, that would be really good. And so we're going to put you in breakouts of 2 and 3. Is that right, Pat?
Yeah, I think so. I think 3 is it.
2 or 3, and if you could, the person who's got the longest hair is the person who's going to start, and the other 2 people or the other person, listen to them. And the more honest and authentic and bold and real you are about this, the more you'll get out of this little time we have together. So, tell a tale on yourself. I can say myself, I am completely crazed with time. I always think I didn't have enough time to do anything. And then when I look back on my day, I've done so much I can't even remember the morning. Mm-hmm. But still, before I go to sleep, I think I didn't get enough done, etc. So I invite you to share with your partners for, let's say, 2 minutes apiece. And there'll be hopefully a little thing on the screen that says, go to the next person. If there's not, you'll have to time yourselves. longest hair person starts sharing and the other two listen. And then the next person, and then the next person, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. So off you go.
We've got about a minute left. Start to wrap it up. We've got about a minute left. Start to wrap it up.
So, hey, Lynn, you there? She's probably still on a break.
I'm here.
Hey, while we're waiting for them to come up, I want you to meet my wife. She's right there next to you, Debbie.
Oh, hi, Debbie. Oh, what a pleasure to meet you. Hey, I love your husband. I hope that's okay.
I got a hug from her every morning, Debbie. Big old warm hug. Yep. It was wonderful. Of course, so did everybody else. You know, I was thinking the other day what a contrast it is after you spend a week at MEA and you feel all this love and equality and nobody's competing and you're not comparing money. It's a wonderful week. And then as soon as you hit back to the US, actually, when you get off the plane, you just see people tensed up and rushing around and trying to get to one place or another, and all this stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So we need that contrast. Looks like we got everybody back, I think, 21 people.
Yay. Welcome back. Yeah. Thank you, Pat. Well, I'm so grateful that people took a little time to see where they're caught in the web of scarcity. And I do want to talk before we close, and I think we have now 20 minutes left, a little bit less. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'd like to,
I want to talk about sufficiency before we end, because that's kind of the punchline here.
yes, that's right.
And then give people an opportunity to do another process if we can do it. It'll be a little shorter, but can I go into that now, Pat? Is
Oh,
that?
please do. Please do.
Well, thank you for doing that exercise. I hope it was useful for you to sort of look at your own eyeballs. You know how it's hard to do that sometimes. So I'm going to tell you that I think this thing about scarcity is an absolute lie. And that's a strong word, but I mean it, because I think the real truth, or what I call the radical surprising truth, is sufficiency, or enough. That you and I are enough, we have enough, and we are sufficient in every possible way. And sufficiency actually sounds like it's an amount of something, but it's not. It's a state of being. The experience of being enough, knowing that you are enough exactly the way you are, allows you to be present and whole and in oneness with the universe, has you stop comparing yourself to everybody else, has you feel that you know that one of the things that you can do is be a contribution to the world rather than a complaint about it. And you start to realize that, that being enough exactly the way you are overflows into a kind of natural abundance. And so I've often, talked about this part of this for much longer than I'm going to today, but I'll just say that when we actually dwell in what I call the truth, the radical, surprising truth of sufficiency, of enoughness, of knowing that who we are is exactly who we need to be, that our needs are always met, and sometimes they're met in ways that we a little bit don't like a divorce or a cancer diagnosis. But if you really accept life as a teaching, as a constant bounty of opportunities for growth and development and learning, and that you're constantly gifted, even sometimes with things that are hard, that make you more resilient, that make you realize you're self-reliant, that help you to disengage from something that's no longer appropriate for you, You start seeing that you are enough. There is enough. And what there is to do is be useful and a contribution to the world. So I don't think you can actually get to true prosperity through the doorway of more. I think that will always lead you to lack, and then you need more again. And then you get more, and then that leads you to lack, and then you need more again. I think that that's kind of an endless, fruitless cycle. But when you go through the portal or the doorway of enough, it naturally flows into abundance. That it starts to overflow into abundance out of the deep and profound appreciation of enough. So there's a principle I'm going to say, and I'll put it in the chat a little bit later. If you let go of trying to get more of what you don't really need, which is what we're brainwashed to want more of, it frees up oceans of energy all tied up in that chase to turn and pay attention to what we already have. When you pay attention to what you already have, when you nourish what you already have, when you make a difference with what you already have, it expands. So let me say that again. When you let go of trying to get more of what you don't really need, it frees up oceans of energy to turn and pay attention to what you already have. When you pay attention to what you already have, when you nourish what you already have, when you're grateful for what you already have, and when you share what you already have, it expands. Another way of saying that that's a little bit shorter is what you appreciate appreciates. What you appreciate appreciates. So I'm going to invite you to go back into little groups, and we only have 15 minutes left or 14. So this can't be quite as long. It'll be more like each of you take a minute or so.
Maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah. And say what you absolutely love about your life, the bounty and blessing that you live in, what your treasures are, what you love about your life, how gifted you are, how grateful you are, the bounty and blessings of your life. So I'm going to send you off right away so you have time to share one by one. And this time, the person with the shortest hair goes first. 1 minute, the bounty and the blessing of your life. Ready, go.
Okay. Here they come.
Here they come. Yay, they came back.
We're all wealthy, Lynn.
We are. We just love have to own it and say so.
So we are about out of time. I think we could open it up for a few questions or comments. I would love to hear a comment from anybody about anything that's been said here that might have resonated with you that you want to hold on to. For example, one of the things you said here that I made a note of, Lynn, was accept life as it is, not as it should be. I get all caught up with the way life should be instead of just what I have.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to ask a question or jump in there real quick?
Yes. Just real quick, we have a request here in the room to hear the Nelson Mandela story.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, the Nelson Mandela story is fantastic. Oh my God. All right. Will you tell it?
I can, but do we, I'm worried about the time, so I'll see if I can do the shortest possible version.
Well, I think that if you realize that some people might have to log off, but obviously enough people want to hear it.
Well, I'll just say that I was lucky enough to attend his inauguration. And after the inauguration, there was a luncheon, a brunch actually on a green lawn for thousands of people that were kind of dignitaries, and I got to be there. And at one point, President Mandela at the head table asked Benazir Bhutto, president of Pakistan, to move her chair over a little bit. She was on his right, and Prince Philip, who was on his left, he asked her to move him to move his chair over, and he stood up and he brought up to the front to the head table his two of the jailers that he spent 27 years with. And they were large, kind of paunchy Afrikaner men with white hair and were ruddy complected, and were I would say kind of the kind of person you wouldn't warm up to right away. And they stood on either side of him, and he said, "I want everybody to meet two of my three jailers who are here at my inauguration." And I spent the first 17 years of imprisonment in hard labor, torture, and solitary confinement, and they were the only people I saw. And I had enormous hatred for them, and they had enormous hatred for me. But in the 17th year of my imprisonment, I realized that that I needed to find a way to love these people, love these men, because I might be there for the rest of my life, and it was too painful for me to hate. So I set out to understand them, to talk to them, to find out about their families, to talk about what they cared about and what they loved. And by the end of that year, I did in fact love them. And that's when I took back the leadership of the movement from prison, because I knew that the oppressor needs to be liberated as much as the oppressed. And I knew if we could liberate South Africa, we wouldn't just liberate the oppressed, we would need to liberate the oppressor, because the oppressor is in as much pain in a different way. Their heart is shut down. They do things that they know are wrong. They feel terrible about themselves. They may not show it, but they are as locked into that system as the people that they oppressed. And so that's when I took the movement back. And it was the love for these two men. And I want to ask now, in front of all of you, I want to ask both of them for their forgiveness for my 17 years of hating them. And they forgave him, and then they asked him for his forgiveness, and he forgave them, and they were all crying. And then he said, "On this forgiveness, we will build our new nation."
What happened in the audience at that moment?
Well, we were all crying. Everybody was. We were so moved. We all stood up and cheered. And it was, in many ways, that was when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was born. It wasn't born until several weeks after the inauguration with Desmond Tutu and Mandela, but it was that moment that in spirit, it had its spiritual birth, its spiritual home in the hearts of everybody who was there, but particularly in the heart of Nelson Mandela and the two men who he hated and who hated him for 17 of those 27 years. So I would say it was a really powerful moment, the birth of a new way of looking at completing conflict.
Yes. That's profound.
Yeah. We are unfortunately out of time. I know, and I respect your time, Lynn, and if you have to log off, but I know that people are going to hang around. They always do, but for this one, they're going to want to hang around. So if you want to chat, but I want to thank everybody for being here, especially Lynn. And I just want to close this by sharing another part of Lynn's book. As I recall, she learned this from the Ashawa tribe in the Amazon rainforest, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, Lynn.
I can stay on for another 10 minutes if everyone else can. I can talk about that.
Oh, because I think, yeah, we need to know what you're doing in that area if anybody wants to stay. But, you know, you said in your book that these people who lived in what we would view as a very primitive lifestyle, nothing like ours. And they said, if you're coming to help us, don't bother. But if your liberation is bound up with ours, then let's get to work together.
Mm.
Right. Yeah.
So those of you who have to leave right up at 7, thank you for being here. We appreciate you, and the fact that we appreciate you means that you will appreciate. Okay. So thank you very much. And then Lynn has graciously said she'll stay for questions and little chat. So we'll open it up. Who's got the first question or comment?
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah, Morgan.
Hey, Lynn, I think that your myths were so right on. Any advice on how to be mindful of those and how to really drive that message deep down internally to where we kind of embody it? Like, is there a daily practice or a saying that you tell yourself?
Well, I'll say a couple things. Thank you, Morgan, for that question. The culture we live in promotes scarcity thinking. So that's not going to go away. And to be aware that scarcity thinking is the driver of our economic system, our education system, our governance systems, our politics, it's all embedded in the institutions that we live in. They're beginning to fall apart, and hopefully we'll recreate them from a different context, a context of enough or sufficiency. But right now we live in systems and structures that promote scarcity thinking. But one way to keep yourself out of the scarcity loop is to focus on gratitude, gratefulness, and almost go way beyond what you think might even be reasonable in being grateful for this moment, that we have something called Zoom that would allow us to connect across the world for 2 years. Or I don't know what we would have done without Zoom and some of these technologies. To be super grateful for the fact that Pat read my book. I'm grateful for that and wanted to share that with you. To be grateful that the people that are sitting in the room right now that aren't leaving, and I can see you, and I'm so grateful that you're sitting there looking at the screen, are taking an extra 10 minutes to learn a little bit more and to be together. To be grateful for air and water and sleep and wakefulness. There's a book, there's a site called gratefulness.org of Brother David Stendal Ross, gratefulness.org, very simple. And you can join the Network for Grateful Living, which keeps you honest and true about how life is constantly a gift. Just being alive is a gift. And then there's this beautiful book written by my friend Christy, Wake Up Grateful, that has practice after practice after practice. But before I go to bed at night, I write 5 things I'm grateful for in a journal. The color yellow, the capacity to breathe, my husband's smile, the brownie I ate that I loved so much that I savored it. If you say grace before you eat, in gratitude, your meal, even if it's not that healthy a meal, will do more for your body because you're receiving it with grace and gratefulness. So gratitude and gratefulness are a huge part of keeping us out of the mindset of scarcity. And then really being willing to talk about what you love the way you just did, how wonderful your life is. It's easy to complain. It's cheap to complain, I'm going to say. But to celebrate life. Oh my God, my friends are so wonderful. Oh, I feel so grateful to have a roof over my head. I'm so grateful that the world has woken up to gun violence in a way that we hadn't. I hate that it had to happen this way. But look at the world's relationship now with violence. We're upset about Ukraine. We're upset about the children that went through that horrible experience. Where our hearts are broken open. Our hearts are broken, but they're broken open, and that's a good thing. So you look for what you can be grateful for and what you can appreciate and express your appreciation 10 times more than you ever did before. Appreciate people, places. When you go to the cleaners to pick up your clothes, tell the person who wrote that little ticket for you and you paid the money for, thank you so much for cleaning my clothes. I deeply appreciate it. I know we pay you, but I just want you to also know I appreciate you. Appreciation has enormous power for you and the people you appreciate. So those are a few things. And then one more thing that I say when I'm in a hurry, which is, you know, we could say we are here in a hurry now for me to get in this last thing, but I'm not going to do it that way. I have a phrase in my head when I start going faster than is appropriate. Refuse to rush. Refuse to rush, Lynn. Refuse to rush. When you try to get someplace faster, you never get there faster. You make a wrong turn, you can't find a place to park, etc. Just refuse to rush. And that's another way to keep yourself centered in enough, in sufficiency. And it's perfect just the way that it is. Thank you.
You know, you're not, what really got me is you're not looking for the big stuff. You appreciate the color yellow. I would never have thought about that. You know, it's stuff that's all around you every day. I'm always looking for the big stuff. Who else has got a question or a comment? Looks like we have one here.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Hi. Wonderful experiences, and I probably felt like I shouldn't be speaking, but we were having an interesting conversation in response to your those two aspects of scarcity versus sufficiency. We were talking about. I was just telling them, and they said I should say it. Is basically like currently, I was saying like I have no real drive to attain anything, right? Like there's no, and it's out of place of happiness. It's not out of like, I've given up or anything. In the true sense, even if I was even mentioning, even when my money runs out at some point, or I don't find work interesting or something like that, I'd be happy to just like hang my hat and, commit euthanasia, right? That's the ultimate, taking your sufficiency to the nth degree, because you're happy with the life and it's not out of pain. You're just saying like, I'm not going to experience anything new, and it is very good, and I'm happy, and it's something not foreign to me, because a lot of the saints in India do reach this state, and this is the goal of Indian spirituality, is to reach nirvana, right? So to attain ultimate peace, the cycle of birth. And so you renounce your life itself happily. That's a little taking, because even when you say sufficiency and everything, you still end with abundance. You're still talking about more of some happiness. You're still feeding into that scarcity thinking in your positive message. That was my,
Well, first of all, thank you so much for speaking and not speaking. And I love what you said. I think it's, there's a wonderful phrase from Brother David. We're not grateful because we're happy. We're happy because we're grateful. And that's you, And happiness is such a contribution. It's a huge contribution to the world for people to be happy. It's a drain on the world for people to be unhappy. And when we can find our own happiness and express it, it's a contribution to everybody around you. Let me just say something about abundance, because I may have not have made it clear. True abundance is the expression of enough, the overflowing experience of enough, which is what you have. False abundance is more. So when you're in a state of bliss, like I was when I met with Mother Teresa, I was one with the universe, I was one with God. There was no amount of anything. There was nothing to compare anything to. It was just full on, you might say plentitude. So the word abundance is a little tricky because it makes it sound like more than you need. In the context or the condition of scarcity, yes, abundance is more than you need. But when I talk about being abundantly happy or abundantly satisfied, it's really the plenitude that comes with the fullness, the great fullness, Brother David would call the great fullness of life, for which we're grateful. And I think what you shared is absolutely true. There's so much wisdom in India about how to live. And in many cases, that comes from being in a place often, and that's not true for everybody in India, of course, but where there's, some people would call it poverty, when in fact the inner riches are where people go to find their well-being or their wealth. And I did want to say one thing that I think is consistent with what you said. The word wealth, W-E-A-L-T-H, the etymology of it is well-being. It's not money, it's well-being. So well-being is true wealth. That's true wealth. That's real prosperity. So thank you.
Anybody else? I almost said we don't have enough time, but then I had to check myself. Mom, we got plenty of time. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I read the book before coming to today's session, and I have to tell you that chapter 5, Money is Like Water, was so exciting.
Yes.
Really, really pumped. So I'm not going to give it away what it is. I'm just saying you need to for sure read that chapter of the book. It's super exciting. Of course, it helps to know what she said before. And thank you for having it available on audiobook. It's much easier to consume that way. But just wanted to share that with you. And thank you for being here today.
What's your name?
I'm Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
Catherine has written a couple of books about the Academy Awards, by the way. So she's a fellow author.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
Catherine.
Do we have any other comments, questions? Here we go.
Well, I didn't read the book, but I am here and I have heard a lot of things. And I like it because I was talking to Catherine about some concepts, and it was, I don't know, it was like kind of like self-actualized. I don't know, like if you're self-actualized, I feel like the ideas that you're talking about will make sense. It's kind of like you were understanding like where you fall in the world and like what you need and what you don't need, what's important, what's not. So yeah, like I feel like this book is really good with like self-actualization, because that's what it seems like, the premise is. It's just like when you become self-actualized, you won't really like need access. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Somebody wants to know about the rainforest.
Oh, the
So
rainforest.
I just got a glimpse of Mark there, and I hope I don't embarrass you, Mark, but could you come on and meet Lynne personally? I'd love for you to tell Lynne what you're doing in San Antonio with the homeless people.
Well, Lynn, it's an honor to be with you. Look at the camera. So San Antonio is the largest city in the United States that doesn't have a common site for the homeless. United States came up with the concept of housing first. That's the way to deal with homeless, but in San Antonio, that meant here, there, and everywhere. So you might get selected for an apartment and you go in and you see you have a bathroom and you have a door that locks and a bed and a TV, and you may start crying because you felt like you died and went to heaven. But 6 months later, you may not be in this heaven because loneliness pulls you out and you're back on the street with your fellow warriors. So a common site puts people together, but also we have mental health and dentistry and community kitchen. And so it's all about community. That seems to be the special sauce on really not just having a place to live, but to live in where you're cherished as a human being. So that's what we're working on. It's called Town Twin Village here in San Antonio.
That's wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that gives me the opportunity to both say just a couple things about the rainforest, because I work with Indigenous people, and the Indigenous people live in total communal bliss with each other and with the natural world and with the community of life, really. And they have a way of living where the good of the community is the highest ethic, and then within that, individuals are cared for. Whereas our modern world, we live where we individuate so much, we individuate at the expense of the community. And then sometimes the community is sacrificed for our individual achievements. And it looks like you've turned that around, which is, I think, what everybody's looking for. Everybody wants to be in community. Everybody wants relationships. That's the real wealth of life. And it's so true. The homeless people that I know here in San Francisco really love each other. I mean, you know, they don't want to be living under the bridge, but they love living with each other. And to separate them and put them in a cubbyhole by themselves, as you said, you know, in the beginning is looks like a solution. In the end, it's not at all. They'll leave and find relationships which are way more important to them, to all of us. So I love what you're doing, and I think it's a beautiful example. And in the rainforest, the Amazon rainforest where we work with 30 indigenous tribes at the headwaters of the Amazon rainforest, which is the source of the entire rainforest system, which is larger than the United States. And we're committed with these the partners that we have, which are the 30 indigenous tribes. Their commitment is to put it in permanent protection, the headwaters of the Amazon. And it's almost all pristine and roadless and untouched. A lot of the Amazon's being destroyed, but this particular part of it at the very beginning, at the base of the Andes, is the source of the whole Amazon system. And so it's such a privilege and an honor to work with Indigenous people, because their way of seeing is that they're part of the earth, they're part of the community of life. Everything alive is their kin. It's not like they live in the forest, they are of the forest. It's not like they live among the animals and plants. They are of the animals and plants. These are kin to them. And that experience of community, not only with the other people of the tribe or their other fellow human beings, is with everything in life. And it's so rich and so wonderful to be with them and to learn that that's another way to perceive the life we've been given. So I'm very grateful to you, Pat, for setting this up. I'm grateful that San Antonio has such a feeling of community. And I can see it on the screen. I can feel it when you talk. I can see how you guys want to hang out with each other all night, probably. And I'm going to say I have a quote that I could at least end my participation with, Pat. Would that be okay to do that now?
That would be wonderful.
It's a quote from Hazrat Inayat Khan, one of the great Sufi teachers. And it sort of says what I've been trying to say throughout this whole time. And it's in the book, Soul of Money. It's in this book, if you have it. It's in 241, the page 241. It says this: I ask for strength So God gave me difficulties, which made me strong. I asked for wisdom, and God gave me problems to learn to solve. I asked for prosperity, and God gave me a brain and brawn to go to work. I asked for courage, and God gave me dangers to overcome. I asked for love, and God gave me people to help. I asked for favors, and God gave me opportunities. I received nothing I wanted. I received everything I needed. Thank you so much, everybody, and God bless you all and take care. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn.
We are filled with abundance. And you want to hear something interesting? I had opened your book to page 241, and I was going to close with that poem. So help me. Whoa. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bless you.
You're
Take
so
care.
gracious to spend so much time with us.
My absolute pleasure and delight. Thank you, everybody.
There's another MEA alum up there, Shayna. She's finally come on the screen.
Hi, Shayna.
Okay.
Pat,
All
thank
right.
you, everyone. Wonderful.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.